Imagine being so powerful that entire galactic civilizations tremble at the mere whisper of your name. Yet you choose to live as a simple janitor on a forgotten space station. What happens when alien overlords mistake your humility for weakness? What occurs when they push the one being in the universe who could end their reign with a single thought? This is the story of Marcus Chun, a human who swept floors and cleaned toilets while three brutal alien empires divided the galaxy between them. They saw him as nothing more than a primitive creature, barely worth the oxygen he breathed. They were about to learn the most terrifying lesson in galactic history. Never underestimate a human who has chosen peace over power. The universe was about to witness why humans don't just survive, they reshape reality itself. Marcus Chun pushed his cleaning cart down the grimy corridors of Station Omega 7, the squeak of its broken wheel echoing through the metal halls. The station floated in the dead space between three galactic empires, serving as a neutral trading post where the most dangerous beings in the universe conducted their business. To everyone who saw him, Marcus was just another human slave, one of millions scattered across the galaxy after Earth's supposed conquest 50 years ago. The station's artificial gravity hummed beneath his feet as he entered the central hub, where massive viewports displayed the swirling nebula that hid the station from prying eyes. Alien merchants of every conceivable species crowded the marketplace, their universal translators creating a cacophony of deals being struck and threats being made. The air recyclers struggled to process the mixture of atmospheric requirements, creating a perpetual haze that smelled of ozone and fear. Marcus paused to empty a waste receptacle, his weathered hands moving with practiced efficiency. At 53, he'd spent the last 20 years on this station, watching civilizations rise and fall through the stories of traders and refugees. His gray hair was thinning, and deep lines creased his face, making him appear older than his years. To the casual observer, he was exactly what he appeared to be, a broken human doing menial work to survive. A group of Zephyrian soldiers marched through the hub, their crystalline armor catching the artificial light. The Zephyrians were one of the three great powers that divided the galaxy between them, along with the biomechanical hegemony and the energy beings known as the Constellation. Each empire claimed territory that spanned thousands of star systems, and between them, they had crushed every species that dared to resist their expansion. "Move, vermin," hissed Commander HFY, the lead Zephyrian, as he shouldered past Marcus. The alien's four arms gestured dismissively, nearly knocking over the cleaning cart. His translator rendered his words in perfect standard galactic, dripping with contempt. "Your kind should have been exterminated decades ago." Marcus steadied his cart and continued cleaning, showing no reaction to the insult. This was his daily reality, invisible to those who mattered, stepped on by those who didn't recognize his worth. He had learned long ago that invisibility was its own form of power. Nobody paid attention to a janitor, which meant nobody watched what he did or where he went. The station manager, a corpulent hegemony official named Brokerzul, waddled over to the scene. His cybernetic implants whirred softly as his organic brain interfaced with the station's computer systems. Half of his face was mechanical, the result of enhancement surgeries that allowed him to process information at superhuman speeds. "My apologies, Commander," Zul said, his voice a mixture of organic speech and electronic modulation. "The human understands his place. He's been here so long. He's almost part of the station's equipment." Commander HFY's multifaceted eyes focused on Marcus with predatory interest. "I've heard rumors about your pet human, Zul. They say he's been here since before the Neutral Zone Accords. How is that possible? Most humans barely live to see 60 standard years." Marcus continued cleaning, but his enhanced hearing picked up every word of their conversation. The other patrons of the station gave the group a wide berth, recognizing the dangerous tension building between the two officials. A Calaxian merchant quickly ushered his family away from the area, his tentacles quivering with anxiety. "The human is useful," Zul replied carefully. He knows every system on the station, speaks 12 languages, and worked for nothing but basic sustenance. Why would I replace such an efficient tool? The Zephyrian commander stepped closer to Marcus, studying him like a specimen under analysis. There's something about this one that bothers me. His eyes, they're too calm for a broken slave. Most humans in his position show constant fear or desperation. This one shows neither. Marcus looked up briefly, meeting the commander's gaze. For just a moment, something flickered in his dark eyes, something ancient and profound that made the Zephyrian's combat instincts scream warnings. But the moment passed so quickly that Vexai wondered if he had imagined it. He's seen enough horror to be numb to it, Zul explained, though he sounded less certain than before. 50 years of conquest does that to a species. The survivors learn to accept their fate. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the docking bays. A Constellation Patrol ship had arrived, its energy-based crew flowing through the station's corridors like living lightning. The beings of pure energy were rarely seen in physical space, preferring to exist in the quantum realms between dimensions. Their presence meant something significant was happening. Captain Oridan materialized in the central hub, her form a constantly shifting pattern of golden energy contained within a humanoid framework. When she spoke, her voice resonated directly in the minds of everyone present, bypassing their physical hearing entirely. Station Manager Zul, we require use of your long-range communication array. There have been developments in the Outer Rim that require coordination between the three empires. Broker Zul's cybernetic components flashed rapidly as he processed this information. Of course, Captain. What kind of developments? Human resistance cells have been discovered in the Kepler sector. They appear to be using technology that shouldn't exist, weapons, and defensive systems beyond anything in our databases. The three empires are coordinating a response to eliminate this threat before it spreads. Marcus continued mopping the floor, but his movements had become more deliberate, more focused. Several aliens noticed the change in his demeanor, though none understood its significance. The human who had spent 20 years being invisible was paying very close attention to this conversation. Commander Vexai's excitement was palpable. Finally, some action. My battle group has been stationed at the border for months with nothing to do. When do we begin the assault? The operation begins in 72 hours, Captain Oridan replied. Fleet Admiral Korth of the Hegemony will command the combined forces. We expect minimal resistance. These humans are using scavenged technology and have no military training. The three officials moved away to discuss operational details in private, leaving Marcus alone with his cleaning cart. But he was no longer alone in his thoughts. For the first time in 20 years, the carefully constructed walls around his mind began to crack. Other humans on the station began to take notice of Marcus's changed behavior. Sarah Kim, who worked in the station's hydroponics bay, caught his eye across the hub. She was younger than him by 15 years, one of the second-generation humans born into servitude. Her parents had been killed during the initial conquest, leaving her to grow up knowing only life as a servant. Marcus, she whispered when she approached his cart under the pretense of retrieving cleaning supplies. Did you hear what they said? About the resistance in the Kepler sector? Marcus nodded slowly, his weathered hands gripping the cart's handle with surprising strength. I heard. Do you think it's real? Do you think there are still free humans out there fighting? For the first time in years, Marcus smiled, and Sarah was struck by how the expression transformed his entire face. The broken janitor was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous and infinitely more hopeful. Sarah, there's something you need to understand about our species, he said quietly, his voice carrying an authority that made her straighten unconsciously. Humans don't just fight when they're strong. They fight hardest when they have everything to lose. Before Sarah could ask what he meant, an alarm began blaring throughout the station. The lights flickered from their normal white to the red of emergency status, and automated voices began announcing in multiple languages. Attention, all station personnel. Long-range sensors have detected an unidentified fleet approaching our position. All non-essential personnel report to designated safe areas. This is not a drill. Broker Zoll's voice crackled over the intercom system. Unknown vessels. You are approaching a neutral trading station protected under the Galactic Commerce Accords. Identify yourselves immediately or you will be fired upon. The response came not through the communication system, but through the station's speakers. It was a human voice, speaking in English, a language that had supposedly been extinct for decades. Station Omega 7. This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Free Human Fleet. We are here to collect our people. Stand down your defenses and prepare for boarding. The silence that followed was deafening. Every alien on the station stood frozen, unable to process what they had just heard. Free humans with a fleet? It was impossible. Earth had been conquered, its population scattered or enslaved. The human resistance had been crushed decades ago. Marcus Chun straightened his shoulders and looked directly at the nearest security camera. When he spoke, his voice carried across the station's internal communication system with an authority that made the walls themselves seem to listen. Admiral Vasquez, this is Commander Chun. Station secure. Beginning extraction protocols now. The transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. The broken janitor shed his disguise like a snake shedding old skin, revealing something that made every alien combat veteran on the station take an instinctive step backward. Marcus Chun hadn't been hiding on Station Omega 7 for 20 years. He had been waiting. Commander Vexhai reached for his weapon, but found his hand frozen halfway to his holster. Not by any physical force, but by the sudden, overwhelming certainty that drawing that weapon would be the last mistake he ever made. The human standing before him radiated a presence that spoke to the deepest survival instincts of every predator species in the galaxy. Impossible, Captain Oridin whispered, her energy form flickering with something that might have been fear. The humans were conquered. We broke them. We scattered them across the galaxy. Marcus smiled again, and this time there was no warmth in it. There was only the cold promise of consequences that had been building for 50 years. No, he said simply, you scattered us across the galaxy so we could learn everything about you. Every strength, every weakness, every secret you thought was safe. And now it's time for you to meet the species you thought you had destroyed. The station shuddered as the first human ships began to dock. The docking clamps engaged with a sound like thunder, sending vibrations through Station Omega 7's superstructure. Marcus walked calmly through the chaos as aliens ran in every direction, some toward emergency shelters, others toward their ships in desperate attempts to flee. The human fleet had appeared from nowhere, emerging from the nebula like ghosts materializing from mist. Sarah Kim followed Marcus through the corridors, her mind struggling to process what was happening. The gentle janitor who had taught her basic maintenance skills was moving with the fluid precision of a trained soldier, his every step deliberate and controlled. Other humans throughout the station were undergoing similar transformations, shedding their roles as servants and revealing themselves as something far more dangerous. Marcus, I don't understand, Sarah said as they reached the main docking bay. Who are you really? Marcus paused at a maintenance panel and pressed his palm against the scanner. Instead of the expected access denial, the panel lit up with authorization codes that shouldn't have existed. The bay's blast doors began to open, revealing the sleek hulls of human warships beyond. I'm someone who's been playing a very long game, Sarah, he replied, his fingers dancing across the control interface with impossible familiarity. For 20 years, I've watched and waited while the three empires convinced themselves they had won. They thought scattering humanity across the galaxy was their greatest victory. In reality, it was their greatest mistake. The first human soldiers to board the station moved with precision that made the alien security forces look like amateurs. They wore powered armor that seemed to bend light around it, making them difficult to target even with advanced alien sensors. Their weapons were unlike anything in the galactic database, firing coherent energy beams that passed through shields as if they didn't exist. Commander HFY tried to rally his Zephyrian troops in the central hub, but his crystalline armor provided no protection against weapons that seemed to ignore the fundamental laws of physics. A human soldier appeared behind him, moving with impossible speed, and placed a device against the commander's neck. HFY collapsed instantly, paralyzed but conscious. Non-lethal neural disruptor, the soldier explained to his squad leader. Command wants the leadership alive for interrogation. Admiral Elena Vasquez strode through the docking bay with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. She was a tall woman in her 40s, with graying hair pulled back in a military bun and scars that spoke of battles fought in the dark between stars. Her uniform bore no insignia that appeared in any alien database, but her bearing commanded respect from every human who saw her. "Commander Chun," she said, saluting Marcus with genuine respect. Status report. Marcus returned the salute with military precision that would have shocked anyone who knew him as a janitor. Station secured, Admiral. Minimal resistance. The alien leadership is contained and ready for transport. Excellent. And our intelligence network. Intact and operational. We have complete data on fleet movements, supply lines, and strategic positions for all three empires. The information our people gathered over the past 50 years is more comprehensive than anything they have on each other. Admiral Vasquez nodded, then turned her attention to Sarah and the other confused humans who were beginning to gather in the docking bay. Her expression softened as she saw their faces, recognizing the look of people who had lived their entire lives believing themselves to be defeated. "Citizens," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the bay. "I know you have questions. I know this doesn't make sense. For 50 years, you've been told that humanity was conquered, that Earth was destroyed, that we were scattered and broken. Today, you learn the truth." She gestured toward the viewports, where more human ships were becoming visible as they emerged from the nebula. The fleet was massive, hundreds of vessels ranging from nimble destroyers to massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything the three empires had ever constructed. "Earth was never conquered," Admiral Vasquez continued. "We allowed the three empires to think they had won. We let them scatter our people across the galaxy because we knew something they didn't. Humans don't break when they're spread thin. We adapt. We learn. We become stronger." Sarah found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "But the invasion fleets, the battles, the refugees, all real," Marcus answered. "The people who died were real. The suffering was real. But the defeat was carefully orchestrated. Earth's leadership knew we couldn't win a conventional war against three galactic empires. So we chose to lose in a way that would let us win later." He moved to another control panel, and the station's main display screen activated, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Thousands of points of light began to appear, each one representing a human settlement or individual that the empires thought they controlled. Every human slave, every refugee, every servant like Sarah and myself has been gathering intelligence for 50 years. We know the location of every major military base, every supply depot, every weakness in their defenses. We've infiltrated their governments, their militaries, their research facilities. Some of our people have even been adopted into their families. The scope of it was staggering. The three empires had spent decades believing they were managing scattered human populations, never realizing they were hosting the largest intelligence network in galactic history. Every human janitor, cook, maintenance worker, and servant had been observing, learning, and reporting back through channels so subtle that even the most paranoid alien security services had never detected them. Broker Zol was dragged into the docking bay by two human soldiers, his cybernetic implants sparking from some kind of electrical interference. When he saw Marcus standing beside Admiral Vasquez, his mechanical eye focused with a whir of servos. "You," he said, his voice distorted by damage to his vocal processors. "20 years I've watched you clean floors. 20 years of thinking you were just another broken human. Marcus walked over to the alien station manager, studying him with the same clinical interest that Zul had once shown when discussing human limitations. And for 20 years, you've been providing me with unrestricted access to every system on this station. Your communication logs, your financial records, your meetings with Empire officials. Did you know that you've been one of our most valuable intelligence assets? The horror in Zul's remaining organic eye was visible as he realized the implications. Every piece of sensitive information that had passed through the station, every secret meeting between Empire officials, every strategic discussion he had facilitated had been monitored and recorded by the human he thought was too simple to understand what he was hearing. Captain Oridin materialized in the docking bay, her energy form more unstable than before. This is impossible. Our sensors would have detected such a massive fleet. Our intelligence networks would have identified your agents. Admiral Vasquez smiled, and it was the expression of a predator who had successfully stalked her prey for decades. Your sensors detect what we allow them to detect. Your intelligence networks see what we want them to see. Did you really think that a species capable of developing faster-than-light travel would be unable to develop equally advanced stealth technology? She gestured to one of her officers, who produced a small device that began projecting holographic displays around the docking bay. The images showed human colonies that the empires had never discovered, research facilities hidden in the void between stars, and shipyards where the massive human fleet had been constructed in secret. While you were congratulating yourselves on conquering humanity, we were building an interstellar civilization that you never saw coming. Every setback you gave us, every human you enslaved, every system you thought you controlled was actually serving our larger strategy. The holographic displays shifted to show battles being fought across the galaxy. Human fleets were emerging from hidden bases, striking at Empire installations with surgical precision. The attacks weren't random acts of terrorism, but coordinated military operations designed to cripple the three empires' ability to respond to threats. The resistance cells in the Kepler sector that you were planning to eliminate. Admiral Vasquez continued. They were bait. We wanted you to concentrate your forces in one location so we could study your coordination protocols. Now we know exactly how the three empires communicate during a crisis, and we've already begun disrupting those communications. Commander Vex High, still paralyzed but able to speak, managed to croak out a question. What do you want? If you could have remained hidden, why reveal yourselves now? Marcus knelt beside the fallen Zephyrian commander, his expression serious. Because hiding was never the end goal. It was preparation. For 50 years, we've watched you divide the galaxy between your three empires. We've seen how you treat the species you conquer, how you strip worlds of their resources, how you eliminate any civilization that might challenge your dominance. He stood and looked out at the human fleet through the viewports. We've concluded that the galaxy would be better off without your empires controlling it. The implications hit the alien officials like a physical blow. This wasn't a rebellion or an independence movement. This was a complete reversal of the galactic power structure planned and executed over the course of half a century. The humans hadn't just survived their supposed conquest, they had used it as an opportunity to position themselves as the dominant force in the galaxy. Sarah was staring at Marcus with a mixture of awe and disbelief. All this time you knew there were free humans out there, and you never said anything. Marcus's expression softened as he looked at her. Sarah, what would you have done if I had told you the truth 5 years ago? Would you have been able to maintain your cover? Would you have been able to continue pretending to be a broken servant while waiting for the right moment to act? She considered this, then shook her head. The knowledge would have changed everything about how she behaved, how she interacted with the aliens, how she carried herself. The weight of hope would have made the deception impossible to maintain. The hardest part wasn't learning to be invisible, Marcus continued. It was watching good people suffer and die while knowing that I couldn't reveal the truth. Every human who was mistreated, every family that was separated, every person who gave up hope. I had to watch it all happen while maintaining my cover. Admiral Vasquez placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. The sacrifice your generation made won't be forgotten, Commander. The children who grew up thinking humanity was defeated will inherit a galaxy where we're the dominant species. That's the gift you've given them. The station's communications system crackled to life again, but this time the voice belonged to another human officer. Admiral, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 different alien governments in the past hour. News of our emergence is spreading faster than the empires can contain it. Any word from the Empire homeworlds? Radio silence from all three. But our deep cover agents report emergency sessions of their ruling councils. They're trying to figure out how to respond to a threat they never saw coming. Admiral Vasquez nodded with satisfaction. Begin Phase 2. All fleet commanders are authorized to accept surrenders, but continue the advance toward Empire space. I want the three emperors to understand that their time as galactic powers is over. As if responding to her words, alarms began sounding throughout the station again. But these weren't emergency alerts. They were victory bells, activated by humans who had spent decades dreaming of this moment. The sound echoed through the corridors like a song of freedom that had been 50 years in the making. Marcus looked at Sarah one more time. In a few days, you'll have choices that your parents never had. You can return to Earth, which has become more beautiful than you can imagine. You can join the fleet and help liberate other human settlements. Or you can help us build a new kind of galactic civilization, one where no species has to live in fear of conquest. Sarah wiped tears from her eyes, tears she hadn't realized she was crying. What about them? She asked, gesturing toward the captured alien officials. They'll be tried by a joint tribunal representing all the species they've oppressed, Admiral Vasquez replied. Justice will be served, but it will be civilized justice. We're not becoming the monsters we're replacing. As the human fleet prepared to jump to their next objective, Marcus Chun took one last look around Station Omega-7. For 20 years, this place had been his prison and his post, the location where he had played his part in the greatest deception in galactic history. Now, it would become a symbol of something else entirely. The moment when humanity revealed that reports of their defeat had been greatly exaggerated. The janitor who had cleaned floors while empires fell around him smiled and prepared to help write the next chapter of galactic history. 3 days after the liberation of Station Omega-7, the Zephyrian Empire's response came in the form of a massive fleet emerging from hyperspace near the human colony of New Geneva. The system had been one of the first human settlements to be openly established after the revelation, a former mining outpost that now served as a refugee processing center for liberated humans. Admiral Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable, studying the tactical displays as her officers provided updates on the approaching Zephyrian force. The enemy fleet was larger than anything the three empires had assembled in decades, with over 300 warships led by their newest dreadnought, the Shattering Light. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian flagship, reported Communications Officer Martinez. It's Emperor Vexthal himself. On screen, the view screen filled with the image of a massive Zephyrian, his crystalline carapace scarred from countless battles. Unlike his subordinates, the Emperor bore marks of ancient combat that spoke to a warrior who had personally conquered dozens of worlds. His 4 arms gestured with predatory grace as he spoke, his translator rendering his words in perfect, cold English. So, the insects have finally revealed themselves, Emperor Vexthal said, his multifaceted eyes fixed on Admiral Vasquez. 50 years of deception and cowardice, hiding behind the skirts of neutral treaties while plotting like the vermin you are. Did you think we would not respond to your pathetic uprising? Admiral Vasquez maintained her composure, though every human on the bridge felt the weight of standing face to face with one of the galaxy's most brutal rulers. Emperor Vexthal, I am Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Free Human Fleet. I'm authorized to accept your surrender. The alien emperor's laughter was like the sound of breaking glass. You have delusions of grandeur, human. Your little trick at the trading station may have impressed some minor border worlds, but you now face the might of a true galactic empire. I have brought enough firepower to sterilize every planet in this system. Behind the Emperor, the bridge of the shattering light was visible, showing dozens of Zephyrian officers working at control stations. Advanced holographic displays showed the positions of both fleets, with the human forces significantly outnumbered. The Emperor gestured toward these displays with obvious satisfaction. I see you have perhaps 50 ships in this system, all of them smaller than our cruisers. My tactical officers estimate that we can destroy your entire force in less than 2 hours. After that, we will begin systematically hunting down every human in this galaxy, starting with your precious Earth. Admiral Vasquez smiled, and the expression seemed to unsettle the Emperor despite the overwhelming odds in his favor. Your tactical officers are very thorough, Emperor. Tell me, what do their scanners show about our ship configurations? Emperor Vexthul paused, consulting a display that was just out of view of the transmission. Standard human designs, based on pre-conquest technology. Crude fusion drives, primitive armor, weapon systems that are decades behind current Empire standards. And what do they show about our energy signatures? Another pause, longer this time. Negligible. Your power output is barely registering on our sensors. Are you running on emergency reserves? Admiral Vasquez turned to her tactical officer. Commander Chun, would you please activate our primary systems? Marcus Chun, now wearing the uniform of a fleet commander, moved to the tactical station. His fingers danced across controls that seemed to respond to his touch like living things. Activating primary systems, Admiral. All ships reporting ready for full combat operations. The change was instantaneous and terrifying. Every human ship in the system suddenly blazed with energy signatures that dwarfed anything in the Zephyrian database. The UES Indomitable alone was now generating more power than most Zephyrian battlegroups, and the other human vessels were showing similar increases. Emperor Vexthul's confidence evaporated as his tactical displays recalculated the enemy force strength. Impossible. Those power levels would require antimatter reactors the size of space stations. Not antimatter, Emperor. Admiral Vasquez replied calmly. Quantum singularity cores. Each of our ships carries a controlled black hole as its primary power source. We developed the technology while your empires were busy congratulating themselves on conquering us. The implications hit the Zephyrian Emperor like a physical blow. A species capable of controlling black holes for power generation possessed technology that was centuries ahead of anything the three empires had achieved. The humans hadn't just been hiding. They had been advancing their science at an unprecedented rate. But that's not the most interesting part of our conversation, Emperor. Admiral Vasquez continued. You mentioned that your forces could destroy 50 human ships in 2 hours. I'm curious how long you think it would take 50 human ships to destroy 300 Zephyrian vessels. Emperor Vexthul's multifaceted eyes narrowed as he processed this challenge. You're outnumbered 6-1, human. Whatever technological advantages you believe you possess, they cannot overcome such odds. Commander Chun looked up from his tactical station. Admiral, we're receiving targeting data from the reconnaissance drones. All enemy vessels have been classified and prioritized. Reconnaissance drones? The Emperor's translator struggled with the concept. We see no other ships in this system. That's the point, Admiral Vasquez replied. Our drones are approximately the size of a human fist, constructed from smart matter that renders them invisible to conventional sensors. They've been studying your fleet since it emerged from hyperspace, mapping your defensive systems and identifying weak points. She gestured toward the main view screen, which shifted to show a three-dimensional tactical display. Each Zephyrian ship was highlighted with detailed schematics showing the locations of critical systems, weapon ports, and structural vulnerabilities. The level of detail was astounding, as if the humans had complete blueprints of every vessel in the enemy fleet. Your flagship, the Shattering Light, has a critical weakness in its ventral armor plating, just aft of the main weapon array. Admiral Vasquez continued conversationally. Your engineers try to compensate for it with additional shield generators, but our analysis shows that a concentrated burst of coherent energy at the right frequency would overload those generators and expose the weakness. Emperor Vexthal looked at his tactical officers, who were frantically checking their own sensor readings. How could you know about classified design specifications? Marcus Chun answered, his voice carrying the satisfaction of a plan 50 years in the making. Because humans designed the computers that your engineers used to create those specifications. We've had backdoors in your systems since the day you started using our technology. The revelation was staggering. The three empires had indeed incorporated captured human technology into their systems during the conquest, believing it to be inferior, but useful for certain applications. They had never imagined that the technology came with built-in access points that would allow humans to monitor and control their systems decades later. Every strategic discussion your empire has held for the past 50 years has been monitored by human intelligence, Admiral Vasquez added. We know your fleet positions, your supply lines, your contingency plans, and your personal weaknesses, Emperor. We know about your son's addiction to Calaxian neural stimulants, your daughter's secret marriage to a hegemony noble, and your own health problems that your doctors think are classified. The color drained from Emperor Vexthal's crystalline features as he realized the scope of human infiltration into his empire. Every secret, every plan, every private moment had been observed and cataloged by the species he thought he had defeated. You're bluffing, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. No intelligence network could be that comprehensive. Test us, Admiral Vasquez replied. Attack our fleet and see how well your tactics work when we know exactly what you're going to do before you do it. The standoff stretched for several minutes, with both fleets holding position while the Emperor wrestled with the implications of what he had learned. His tactical officers were whispering urgently among themselves, their earlier confidence replaced by growing concern as they began to understand the technological gap they were facing. Finally, Emperor Vexthal made his decision. All ships attack Formation Alpha 7, target the human flagship, and destroy it before they can activate whatever weapons they're hiding. The Zephyrian fleet moved with practiced precision, their crystalline hulls reflecting the light of the system's star as they accelerated toward the human formation. Advanced targeting systems locked onto the UES Indomitable, preparing to focus the combined firepower of 300 warships on a single target. All human ships, engage, Admiral Vasquez ordered calmly. What happened next redefined the concept of space warfare. The human vessels didn't move to avoid the incoming attack. Instead, they seemed to phase out of normal space-time, becoming translucent and ghostly. The massive Zephyrian barrage passed through them harmlessly, striking empty space where solid ships had been moments before. Dimensional shift completed, Commander Chen reported. All ships now operating in parallel space-time. Enemy weapons cannot target us while we remain phased. While the Zephyrians struggled to understand how an entire fleet had become incorporeal, the human vessels began their counterattack. Beams of energy emerged from the phased ships, striking Zephyrian vessels with impossible precision. Each shot found exactly the weak point that had been identified by the reconnaissance drones, bypassing shields and armor as if they didn't exist. The first Zephyrian cruiser exploded in a burst of crystalline fragments and plasma fire. Then another. Within minutes, a dozen enemy vessels have been destroyed without the human fleet taking a single point of damage. Impossible, Emperor Vexthal breathed, watching his forces being systematically eliminated by an enemy he couldn't even touch. No species has mastered dimensional warfare technology. No known species, Admiral Vasquez corrected. But then, you never really knew humanity, did you, Emperor? You saw us as primitive creatures to be conquered and enslaved. You never bothered to understand what we were truly capable of. The battle, if it could even be called that, continued for exactly 17 minutes. The human fleet moved through the Zephyrian formation like ghosts, striking with surgical precision while remaining completely untouchable. Advanced alien shields, weapons, and armor proved useless against attacks that came from outside normal spacetime. When the dust settled, the Zephyrian Emperor found himself alone on the bridge of his damaged flagship, the only ship in his fleet still intact. His officers were unconscious, victims of neural disruptors that had somehow penetrated the ship's shielding. The massive fleet he had brought to crush human resistance was nothing but debris and escape pods. Emperor, Admiral Vasquez said, her image once again filling the view screen. I believe we were discussing your surrender. Emperor Vexthal looked at the tactical display showing the complete destruction of his forces, then at the human ships that were now fully solid and surrounding his vessel. The reality of humanity's technological superiority was undeniable, and the implications for his empire were catastrophic. You've won this battle, human, he said finally, but you cannot fight the entire galaxy. The hegemony and the constellation will unite against you now. Together, the three empires command millions of ships and trillions of soldiers. Marcus Chen leaned forward in his chair. Emperor, do you remember a Zephyrian saying from your ancient culture? The hunter who wounds the great beast must kill it quickly, or will devour him in its rage. The Emperor's eyes widened as he recognized the obscure proverb from his species' distant past. How do you know our ancient sayings? Because we've been studying your culture for 50 years, learning everything about who you are and where you came from, Marcus replied. And we've learned that your species, like all species, has the potential for greatness. You've simply been led by the wrong people for too long. Admiral Vasquez took over the conversation. Your surrender will signal the beginning of a new era for the Zephyrian Empire. Your people will be treated with dignity and respect. Your worlds will remain under Zephyrian governance, and your culture will be preserved. All we ask is that you abandon the practice of conquering and enslaving other species. The offer was more generous than Emperor Vexthal had any right to expect, given the circumstances. His empire had spent decades oppressing humanity and countless other species, and yet the humans were offering peace with honor rather than complete subjugation. And if I refuse, then we will remove you from power and find Zephyrian leaders who are more interested in peace than conquest. Admiral Vasquez replied matter-of-factly. Your choice, Emperor. Will you help us build a better galaxy, or will you force us to build it without you? Emperor Vexthal looked one more time at the ruins of his fleet, then at the human vessels that had destroyed it without suffering a single casualty. The decision, when it came, was surprisingly easy. I surrender, he said, and with those words, the first of the three galactic empires fell to humanity. The fall of the Zephyrian Empire sent shockwaves across the galaxy that reached the remaining two powers within hours. In the quantum realm that served as the constellation's primary domain, energy beings gathered in configurations that approximated panic. Meanwhile, in the biomechanical cities of the hegemony, organic brains interfaced with quantum computers to process the impossible reality of humanity's return. Supreme Overmind Zaraketh, the cybernetic ruler of the hegemony, stood in the center of her command sphere, a massive construct that floated in the void between dimensions. Her body was more machine than flesh now, the result of centuries of enhancement surgeries that had transformed her from an organic being into something approaching a living computer. Around her, holographic displays showed the remnants of the Zephyrian fleet being escorted to prison facilities by human ships. Analysis, she commanded, her voice a synthesis of electronic modulation and organic breath. General Thurek, her chief military advisor, stepped forward. His own enhancements were less extensive than the Overmind's, leaving him with recognizably organic features beneath his cybernetic implants. The human technological capabilities exceed our projections by several orders of magnitude, Supreme Overmind. Their dimensional warfare technology alone represents an advancement that should have required centuries of development. Show me the tactical data from Emperor Vexthal's engagement. The holographic displays shifted to replay the battle at New Geneva in excruciating detail. The hegemony's computers analyzed every aspect of human performance, from their energy signatures to their movement patterns, searching for weaknesses that could be exploited. Their ships phase out of normal space-time during combat, General Thorek continued. Our weapons cannot target entities that exist in parallel dimensions, and their ability to attack from that state suggests mastery of physics that we thought was purely theoretical. Overmind Zaraketh processed this information through her enhanced cognitive systems, running thousands of scenarios in milliseconds. Options. Direct military confrontation appears inadvisable, the general admitted reluctantly. However, we may have other alternatives. Our intelligence networks have identified the location of the human homeworld. Earth? Confirmed. Deep space reconnaissance has located a heavily defended system in what was previously considered empty space. The humans have been using advanced stealth technology to hide their true home world for 50 years. The Overmind's mechanical components whirred as she processed this development. Estimated population? Approximately 12 billion humans, along with infrastructure that suggests a highly advanced civilization. The planet shows signs of extensive terraforming and technological development far beyond what they possessed during the conquest. Then, we have leverage, Overmind Zaraketh concluded. Prepare the Omega fleet for immediate departure to human space. If we cannot defeat their military forces, we will threaten their civilian population. Even these enhanced humans will not sacrifice billions of their own kind. As the hegemony prepared its response, the energy beings of the constellation were conducting their own deliberations in the quantum realm. Archconductor Luminar, the most ancient of their kind, had gathered the collective consciousness of his species to address the crisis. Unlike the physical beings that dominated the galaxy, the constellation existed as pure energy, their thoughts and emotions manifesting as patterns of light that danced through dimensions beyond normal space-time. When they spoke, it was through direct consciousness transfer that transcended language itself. The humans have revealed capabilities that threaten the natural order, Luminar communicated to his fellows. For 50 years, we believe them to be extinct or irrelevant. This deception speaks to a level of strategic thinking that rivals our own. Another consciousness, the entity known as Prism, responded with patterns of concern and confusion. Their dimensional warfare technology suggests understanding of the quantum realm. They may be able to threaten us even in our own domain. Then, we must act before they fully understand their advantage, Archconductor Luminar decided. Begin the process of reality restructuring. If the humans wish to play with the fundamental forces of the universe, they will discover that we are the masters of that domain. The Constellation's plan was more ambitious than anything the hegemony could conceive. Rather than simply attacking human forces, they intended to alter the laws of physics in local space to make human technology inoperable. As beings of pure energy, they could manipulate the quantum foundations of reality itself, essentially rewriting the rules that govern how matter and energy interacted. Aboard the UES Indomitable, Admiral Vasquez was reviewing intelligence reports when Commander Chun approached with a grave expression. Admiral, we're detecting massive energy buildups from both remaining empires. The hegemony is mobilizing their entire fleet, and the Constellation is beginning some kind of large-scale quantum manipulation. Show me. The main view screen divided to display two different tactical situations. On one side, hundreds of hegemony vessels were emerging from hyperspace jumps, their biomechanical hulls gleaming with weapon ports and defensive systems. On the other, the space around Constellation territory was beginning to shimmer with reality distortions that made sensors malfunction just by observing them. The hegemony fleet is heading directly for Earth, Commander Chen continued. Estimated arrival time is 18 hours. The Constellation activity is centered around our position here at New Geneva. Admiral Vasquez studied the displays with the calm that came from decades of military experience. They're trying to force us into an impossible choice: attack the hegemony fleet and leave ourselves vulnerable to whatever the constellation is planning, or deal with the constellation and allow the hegemony to threaten our homeworld. What are your orders, Admiral? Signal all fleet commanders. It's time to reveal the full extent of our capabilities. As Admiral Vasquez's orders were transmitted across the human fleet, something unprecedented began to happen. Ships that had been operating as separate vessels suddenly began to merge, their hulls flowing together like liquid metal. Within minutes, the 50 ships of the human fleet had combined into a single massive construct that dwarfed anything ever built by the three empires. Flagship combination complete, Commander Chen reported. All systems nominal. The U.S. Unity is ready for full-scale operations. The merged vessel was more than just a larger ship. It was a fundamentally different type of construct that operated on principles the three empires had never imagined. Its hull was composed of smart matter that could reconfigure itself for any purpose, from weapons to defenses to propulsion systems. Its power core was a network of quantum singularities that provided virtually unlimited energy. Begin Phase 3 of Liberation Protocols, Admiral Vasquez ordered. Send a message to both Empire fleets. The transmission that went out to the hegemony and Constellation forces was simple and direct. This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the United Earth System. You are ordered to stand down immediately and prepare for peaceful surrender. Any hostile action against human forces or civilian populations will be met with decisive retaliation. Overmind Zaraketh's response was predictably aggressive. Human Admiral, your threats are meaningless. We have located your home world and will destroy it unless you surrender immediately. You have 1 hour to comply. The Constellation's response was more subtle, but equally ominous. Reality around the U.S. Unity began to shift and warp as the energy beings attempted to alter local space-time. Colors that had no names appeared in the void, and the stars themselves seemed to flicker as fundamental forces were manipulated. Admiral, Commander Chen reported, his voice tight with concentration, the Constellation is attempting to rewrite the physical laws in this region. If they succeed, our technology will cease to function. Countermeasures. Engaging reality anchors. The U.S. Unity responded to the Constellation's attack by deploying technology that the energy beings had never encountered. Arrays of quantum stabilizers extended from the ship's hull, creating zones of protected space where the laws of physics remained constant regardless of external manipulation. The shimmering distortions around the ship suddenly stopped at the boundary of these fields, unable to penetrate the anchored reality. Impossible. Archconductor Luminar's consciousness recoiled in shock. They have found a way to resist reality restructuring. Marcus Chun smiled grimly as he monitored the quantum battle taking place around them. Admiral, the Constellation entities are pulling back. They can't affect us while the reality anchors are active. Excellent. Now let's address the hegemony's threat to Earth. What happened next would be remembered as the moment when humanity finally revealed the true scope of their post-conquest development. The U.S. Unity didn't travel to intercept the hegemony fleet. Instead, it simply reached out across space with technology that operated beyond the normal limitations of distance and time. Overmind Zaraketh was reviewing attack plans when her enhanced consciousness detected something impossible. The space around her command sphere was beginning to fold, creating a tunnel through dimensions that shouldn't exist. Before she could react, the U.S. Unity emerged from the tunnel, having crossed thousands of light years in an instant. Greetings, Overmind, Admiral Vasquez said, her image appearing on the command sphere's communication array. I believe you wanted to discuss the terms of your surrender. The hegemony fleet found itself facing a single human vessel that was larger than their three biggest dreadnoughts combined. But size wasn't what made the encounter terrifying. It was the casual demonstration of technology that made interstellar travel seem primitive by comparison. How did you? Overmind Zaraketh began, her cybernetic systems struggling to process what she was observing. Spatial folding technology, Commander Chun explained helpfully. We can create temporary wormholes that allow instantaneous travel between any 2 points in the galaxy. It's quite useful for rapid response scenarios. General Thorek's organic components were pale as he checked his tactical displays. Supreme Overmind, their vessel is generating energy signatures that exceed our entire fleet by a factor of 10,000. Their technology appears to be based on principles we don't understand. You understand enough, Admiral Vasquez said. You understand that you cannot threaten Earth or any other human world. You understand that your military forces are obsolete compared to our capabilities. And you understand that continued resistance will only result in unnecessary casualties among your own people. The Overmind's enhanced mind ran through millions of calculations, searching for any scenario that would allow the hegemony to maintain its independence. Every projection led to the same conclusion. Humanity had become so technologically advanced that resistance was not just futile, but mathematically impossible. "What do you want from us?" she asked finally. "The same thing we offered Emperor Vexthal," Admiral Vasquez replied. "Peaceful surrender, preservation of your culture and governance, and cooperation in building a galactic civilization based on cooperation rather than conquest. And if we refuse?" Marcus Chun answered this time, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Then we will do what we did to the Zephyrians. We will remove your current leadership and find representatives of your species who are more interested in peace." The threat was delivered without emotion or malice, which somehow made it more terrifying than any angry declaration of war. These humans weren't driven by revenge or hatred. They were simply implementing a plan that they had been developing for 50 years. "I need time to consult with my advisors," Overmind Zaraketh said. "You have 1 hour," Admiral Vasquez replied. "After that, we will assume you have chosen to resist, and we will act accordingly." As the hegemony leadership debated their impossible situation, the constellation was facing its own crisis. Their attempt to alter reality had failed completely, and their energy-based existence offered no protection against human technology that could anchor the laws of physics themselves. "We underestimated them," Archconductor Luminar admitted to his fellow energy beings. "They are not just advanced, they have transcended the normal limitations that govern galactic civilizations." "What do we do?" Prism asked, his consciousness flickering with uncertainty. "We survive," Luminar replied, "and we hope that these humans are more merciful than we would have been in their position." When the hour was up, both remaining empires made the only choice that logic allowed. The hegemony fleet powered down its weapons and transmitted surrender codes. The Constellation entities withdrew from normal space-time and sent a formal declaration of non-aggression through quantum channels. The 50-year war was over, and humanity had won without firing a shot in anger. Admiral Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UES Unity, looking out at the stars that now belonged to a galaxy where no species would again face the threat of conquest and slavery. The plan that had begun with Earth's apparent defeat 5 decades earlier had finally reached its conclusion. "Admiral," Commander Chun said quietly, "we're receiving communication from over 1,000 different species that were oppressed by the 3 empires. They're all asking the same question, which is, they want to know what humanity plans to do now that we control the galaxy." Admiral Vasquez smiled, the expression of someone who had just completed the most difficult task in galactic history. "Tell them that we plan to do something that's never been tried before in this galaxy." "What's that?" "We're going to give it back to them." 6 months after the surrender of the 3 empires, representatives from over 1,500 different species gathered on a space station that hadn't existed a week earlier. The Concordia was humanity's gift to the galaxy, a massive construct built from smart matter and powered by quantum singularity cores, designed specifically to serve as a neutral meeting place for galactic governance. Marcus Chun walked through the station's central assembly hall, marveling at the diversity of life forms that filled the space. Crystalline beings from the Andromeda Spiral conversed with gaseous entities from the galactic core, while species that had never seen each other before the fall of the empires worked together to draft a framework for a new galactic civilization. The transformation had been remarkable to witness. In just 6 months, humanity had not only dismantled the infrastructure of oppression that had dominated the galaxy for centuries, but had also begun the complex process of rebuilding galactic society from the ground up. And they were doing it exactly as Admiral Vasquez had promised, by giving power back to the species they had liberated. "Commander Chun," a familiar voice called out. Marcus turned to see Sarah Kim approaching, though she was almost unrecognizable from the servant who had worked in Station Omega-7's hydroponics bay. She now wore the uniform of a human diplomatic corps officer, her bearing confident and assured. "Sarah," Marcus smiled warmly. "How are the integration protocols proceeding?" "Better than anyone dared hope," she replied, consulting a datapad that showed the current status of thousands of different worlds. 93% of former Empire territories have successfully transitioned to local governance. The remaining 7% are dealing with internal political issues, but nothing that requires human intervention. It was an astounding achievement. In less than a year, humanity had overseen the peaceful transition of power for thousands of worlds and hundreds of different species, all without imposing their own governance structure on anyone. The process had been facilitated by the comprehensive intelligence network that humans had built during their 50 years of supposed defeat, which had given them detailed knowledge of every local political situation in the galaxy. "Any problems with the former Empire leadership?" "Actually, they've been surprisingly cooperative," Sarah replied. "Emperor Vexthal has become one of our most effective advocates among the Zephyrian population. Overmind Zaraketh is working with our scientists to develop beneficial applications for biomechanical technology. Even the constellation entities have begun sharing their knowledge of quantum manipulation for peaceful purposes." Marcus nodded, though he wasn't entirely surprised. The 3 Empire leaders had been given a choice between cooperation and replacement, and they had chosen wisely. More importantly, they had discovered that humans had no interest in ruling over other species, something that had come as a shock to beings who had spent their entire existence focused on domination and control. The Central Assembly Hall began to fill as delegates prepared for the day's main event: the formal establishment of the Galactic Council, a democratic body that would replace the military rule of the 3 empires. Humanity would have a single vote on the council, the same as every other species, despite being the only faction with the technological capability to enforce decisions through military action. Admiral Vasquez took the podium as the assembly fell silent. She looked older than she had during the war, the stress of managing galactic reconstruction having aged her visibly, but her voice still carried the authority that had brought 3 empires to their knees. "Citizens of the galaxy," she began, her words being translated into thousands of languages simultaneously. "We gather today to witness something that has never before existed in galactic history, a truly representative government that serves all species equally." The applause was thunderous, with beings expressing approval in ways that range from harmonic vibrations to coordinated light displays. For many species in the assembly, this was the first time in their entire recorded history that they had participated in galactic governance rather than simply being subjected to it. "The Galactic Council that we established today will have the authority to mediate disputes between species, coordinate responses to galactic threats, and facilitate trade and cultural exchange," Admiral Vasquez continued. "It will not, however, have the authority to impose its will on any member species through military force." This declaration had been one of the most controversial aspects of humanity's proposed galactic government. Every previous attempt at galactic unity had ultimately relied on the threat of force to maintain order, but humans had insisted on a system based entirely on voluntary cooperation and mutual benefit. "Some of you have questioned whether such a system can possibly work," Admiral Vasquez acknowledged. "You point to the long history of conflict between species and argue that force is the only language that galactic civilizations understand. You may be right, but humanity has decided that we would rather risk failure with a just system than guarantee success with an unjust one. Marcus Chun watched from the audience as representatives from species across the galaxy stood to formally accept membership in the new Galactic Council. Some of these beings had been enemies for centuries, their conflicts dating back long before the rise of the three empires. Others had never interacted with alien life before the recent liberation. But there was something different about this gathering compared to every other attempt at galactic unity. These species weren't being forced to cooperate by superior military might. They were choosing to work together because they had witnessed what could be accomplished when advanced civilizations focused on building rather than destroying. The formal ceremonies continued for hours, with each species making statements about their commitment to the new galactic order. When the Zephyrian delegation took the podium, there was a moment of tense silence as beings who had been enslaved by the crystalline empire waited to hear what they would say. "My people have ruled through fear for over 1,000 years," Emperor Vexthal said, his translator rendering his words with perfect clarity. "We convinced ourselves that strength could only be demonstrated through conquest, and that security could only be achieved through the subjugation of others. The humans have shown us a different path." He gestured toward the human delegation, where Admiral Vasquez and Commander Chun sat with a small group of humans who would represent their species on the council. "These beings could have destroyed us completely," the Emperor continued. "They possessed the technological capability to eliminate every Zephyrian in the galaxy, and we had given them ample justification for doing so. Instead, they offered us the chance to become something better than we had ever imagined possible." The silence in the assembly hall was profound as thousands of beings processed the implications of what they were hearing. The most feared military leader in galactic history was publicly acknowledging that humanity had shown mercy where none was deserved. "Today, my people pledge not only to abide by the decisions of this council, but to actively work toward a galaxy where no species needs to fear conquest," Emperor Vexthal concluded. "We have learned that true strength comes not from dominating others, but from helping them become stronger themselves." Similar declarations came from the hegemony and constellation representatives, each acknowledging humanity's restraint and expressing commitment to the principles of the new galactic order. But the most moving speeches came from representatives of species that had been conquered and oppressed for centuries. The Calaxian delegate, whose people had been enslaved by the Zephyrians for over 300 years, spoke through tears that sparkled like jewels in the assembly hall's lighting. "For 12 generations, my people believed that freedom was a myth, something that existed only in ancient stories. Today, we take our place as equals among the stars." A representative of the Nethisian collective, whose worlds had been strip-mined by the hegemony until they were barely habitable, spoke of hope for the first time in living memory. "Humanity has given us more than freedom. They have given us the chance to rebuild our worlds and our culture. We will not forget this gift." Even species that had never been directly oppressed by the three empires expressed gratitude for the new order. The isolated Viridian pods, who had hidden in the galactic rim for centuries to avoid contact with the empires, emerged from their self-imposed exile to join the council. As the formal ceremonies concluded and delegates began to discuss the practical details of galactic governance, Marcus found himself in conversation with Archconductor Luminar, the ancient energy being who had once tried to alter reality itself to stop humanity. "I must ask," Luminar's consciousness communicated directly, "why did your species choose this path? You could have ruled the galaxy as conquerors, as the three empires did. You could have imposed your will through superior technology. Instead, you choose to give away the very power you fought to obtain." Marcus considered the question carefully before answering. "Because ruling through fear and force isn't really ruling at all. It's just delayed rebellion. Every empire that has ever controlled the galaxy through military might has eventually fallen when their subjects grew strong enough to resist. We decided to try a different approach. And if this new system fails? If the species of the galaxy cannot learn to cooperate peacefully, then we'll adapt and try something else, Marcus replied simply. But at least we'll have failed while trying to build something worthy of the species that fill this galaxy. The three empires succeeded for centuries, but what they built was ultimately hollow and unsustainable. Luminar's energy form flickered in what might have been amusement. Your species continues to surprise us. Even now, after witnessing your capabilities, we struggle to understand your motivations. That's because you're still thinking like conquerors, Sarah Kim interjected as she joined the conversation. You're looking for the hidden advantage, the secret plan that will benefit humanity at the expense of everyone else. But there isn't one. She gestured toward the assembly hall, where hundreds of species were working together to solve problems that had seemed impossible just months earlier. This is our advantage, a galaxy where every species can contribute their unique strengths without fear of being conquered or enslaved. That's not just morally superior to empire rule, it's also more efficient. Indeed, the benefits of the new system were already becoming apparent. Scientific advances that would have taken the three empires decades to achieve were being accomplished in months through cooperative research between species with different areas of expertise. Trade relationships that had been impossible under empire rule were creating prosperity for worlds that had been economically isolated for centuries. Most importantly, the constant threat of conquest that had driven galactic politics for millennia had been eliminated. Species that had spent their resources on military defense could now focus on exploration, research, and cultural development. Admiral Vasquez approached their group as the day's sessions were concluding. Commander Chun, Sarah, I have an assignment for you both. Yes, Admiral. The Council has approved funding for the Galactic Exploration Initiative. We're going to send mixed-species crews to explore the regions beyond our galaxy, to see what lies in the void between the Milky Way and Andromeda. The implications were staggering. For the first time in galactic history, civilizations were looking outward rather than inward, thinking about expansion through exploration rather than conquest. The combined resources and knowledge of hundreds of species made such an ambitious project not just possible, but inevitable. Will humanity be leading this initiative? Sarah asked. Admiral Vasquez smiled. No, we'll be participating as equals alongside everyone else. The first exploration ship will have a Calaxian captain, a Zephyrian navigation officer, a human engineer, and a constellation quantum specialist. It will be a true collaboration. Marcus Chun looked around the assembly hall one more time, taking in the sight of former enemies working together to plan humanity's next chapter among the stars. The janitor who had swept floors on Station Omega 7 could never have imagined that his patient work would lead to this moment. You know, he said quietly to Sarah, I think our ancestors will be proud of what we've accomplished. Which ancestors? She asked. The ones who built the first starships, or the ones who chose to be scattered across the galaxy? Both, Marcus replied. The ones who reached for the stars, and the ones who were patient enough to wait 50 years for the right moment to reshape them. As the delegates began to disperse and return to their home worlds, they carried with them something that had never before existed in galactic history. Genuine hope for a future based on cooperation rather than conquest. The three empires had fallen, but what rose to replace them was something far greater than any military force. It was the promise that intelligence, creativity, and compassion could triumph over fear and aggression. It was the proof that even the most advanced civilizations could choose to become something better than they had ever imagined possible. And at the center of it all was humanity, the species that had learned the most important lesson in galactic history. Sometimes the greatest victory comes not from conquering your enemies, but from turning them into your friends. The janitor's war was over, and the galaxy would never be the same.